So in this first section, we're going to go over real numbers and different number systems. So this is in section 1.1, and we're going to talk about different number systems. So the most basic number system that we probably all know are the whole numbers. So the first one we're going to talk about are whole numbers. So these numbers are your counting numbers, including the number 0. So you can remember it by whole, meaning that there's a hole in the number 0. So this is all your numbers: 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. The way we would write this is as a set: 0, 1, 2, etc. So that's your first basic numbers, are going to be the whole numbers. Second number system we're going to look at are the integers. So the integers are very similar to the whole numbers, but now we're going to include all of the negatives of everything. So this is going to be, negative 3, negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, 2, etc. So the integers actually are the first most basic system where we have a symbol to represent them. So in the German language, the word Zahl means number. So the integers are going to be represented by a bold Z. So it's kind of like two lines in the middle, and that's going to be your integers. The third group that we're going to look at are the rational numbers. Rational numbers. So rational numbers are integers, but we're going to look at the ratio of those. So rational numbers are any number that can be represented by a ratio of integers. So for example, I could look at 1/9. That's an integer over an integer, so that's a rational number. I could look at negative 2/5. That's negative 2 over 5. Both are integers, so that's going to be a rational number. What about the number, let's say, negative 2? Now it doesn't look like a ratio, but if I write it as negative 2 over 1, now it is a ratio, so all of my integers are in fact rational numbers. So rational numbers are just all of your ratios of integers to each other. So these are all my rational numbers. The notation that we're going to use is this Q. So we have whole numbers, integers are represented by the boldface Z, rational numbers are notated by the boldface Q. The last number system that we're going to talk about are the real numbers. So this is the main number system that we're going to be working in. Real numbers are any number that can be represented by a decimal or decimal expansion. So these are all your decimals or decimal expansions. So this is going to be something like 0.375. That can be represented as a decimal, therefore it's a real number. Also negative 0.375. Decimal, so it's a real number. 1/9, now that's a fraction, but we can put that in decimal form as the number 0.1 with 1 repeating indefinitely, so that's going to be a real number. We could also have something like 2.12. That's a decimal, so we can write that. Something like pi. Pi is 3.1415926, whatever. It keeps on going forever, but it is a decimal or a decimal expansion, so therefore it's a real number. So real numbers don't have to end finitely. We don't have to have a finite number of decimal places. This is just anything that can be written as a decimal. Those are all going to be real numbers. The notation here is a boldface R. So those are all of our real numbers. Just a quick note. We also have the irrational numbers. So irrational numbers are your real numbers that can't be represented as a fraction. So these are real numbers, but no ratios. What I mean by that is it's got to be a real number, so there better be some sort of decimal expansion, but I can't write it as a fraction. I can't write it as a ratio of an integer to an integer. So an example of this would be pi. Pi is 3.14159 as we said before, but I can't write this as a fraction or any sort of ratio, so therefore it's irrational. Now, as a kind of a converse to that, 0.1 up here repeating, even though that is an indefinite decimal, I can write it as a fraction, so therefore it is rational. So irrationals just mean I can't put it in the form of a fraction. Irrationals, those are also another example would be like the square root of 2. You can't write that as a fraction. Irrational numbers, you can write them as a fraction. So the picture that you kind of want to think about here is overall I have my real numbers, right? So my real numbers can be split, maybe not so evenly, but they can be split as either rational numbers or irrational. And the notation that we're going to use here is our kind of getting rid of Q. So I have my rationals, and then over here I'll have my irrationals. So I have my real numbers, I can split them up into rational numbers, so these are all your fractions. Then I can have my irrationals, those are things that can't be written as a fraction. Over here on the rational side, I have my integers. So that was all of these whole numbers, but also their negatives. And then within the integers, maybe this little section here, those are my whole numbers. Again, we don't have a symbol for it, but those are my whole numbers. So you can see this is how your number system is going to be. The real numbers are the biggest one for now. We might see later that there's a bigger one. Real numbers include everything. Within the real numbers, you have your rational, your irrational. So these are all your fractions. These are things that can't be written as a fraction. So pi, square root of 2, square root of 3, things like that. Within your rationals, I have my integers. Within your integers, I have my whole numbers. So those are going to be all the systems that we're going to work with.